This is the story of a beep. Back in the 70s, the Beatles had their own music label called Apple Records, part of their larger holding company called Apple Corps. Apple Corps. Don't look at me, apparently it was a clever pun. Moving on, in 1978, Apple Corps sued Apple Computers for copyright infringement. The Beatles versus Apple. By 1981, they had settled out of court. But part of that agreement included that Apple Corps would not work in computers and Apple Computers would not work in music. We all know how that turned out for Apple Computers.
This is my recording studio.
The synthesizer and the computer are going to become the folk instrument of the 80s.
By 1986, they had included audio recording facilities onto their computer. Settlement broken, Apple Corps duly took Apple Computers to court again. Around the same time, in the mid-80s, there was an engineer working at Apple called Jim Reeks. He was working on the operating system for the Mac computers and was tasked with creating the sounds that the OS would use. One of them was a simple sound, a chime, called chime. The legal team called him and said he needed to change that file name because they were in the midst of a lawsuit around music against the Beatles. He shrugged his shoulders, briefly contemplated quite hilariously, renaming it Let It Beep, but instead, he sent over a file name to the legal team which was a word with no meaning, a Japanese word, he said, called Sosumi. Except it was no Japanese word, it was a phrase. So-sumi.
I said, I know, so-sumi. I said, we just gotta spell it funny. Like, we'll spell it like it's a Japanese word.
Sosumi. Now, this was an inside joke and remained so for about 10 years, after which Reeks revealed it in an interview. But that file, Sosumi, has been on Mac computers ever since. Reeks went on to make plenty of sonic contributions to the Mac universe, most notably the iconic startup sound, which has its own backstory, including another Beatles reference, as well as the shutter sound we hear when we take screenshots on our iPhones and Macs today. Those were recorded from his old Canon camera. He kind of became known as the man behind the Mac sounds, even though he left Apple more than 25 years ago. These are the kind of stories that I love jumping into at Coffee and Conversations, which I write bi-weekly on Substack. There's a lot more on the whole Reek story, which you can go have a look at. abhisheki.substack.com. Coffee and Conversations.